And now it's time for us to discuss more of these headlines in simple keywords. Adam joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Adam.
Well, good morning, Lena.
You sound well rested and you sound better.
I do. I am feeling much better and I have been well rested. Thank you for asking.
Thanks for joining us bright and early as always. We're going to try to clarify some of these major headlines for all of our listeners. And this is our first pick of the day.
Reorganization.
So the government, Prime Minister's office, and the ruling party have discussed how to reorganize a central government, raise efficiency. That's the goal anyway. They are set to make an announcement soon on the details of the changes.
That's right. This is all in line with the campaign pledges made by President Yoon Suk-yeol during the campaign. He was all about efficiency, about running the government, and he was touting streamlining government agencies and reducing them, and there was a bit of controversy regarding some of the ministries involved. The People Power Party said most of the subjects that were tabled during the discussion at the Prime Minister's office residence were agreed upon by the three parties. The participants discussed shutting down the gender ministry as well. That was one of the hot potato issues that came to light during President Yoon's campaign. And they also talked about the launch of a new space agency as well, and another new agency dedicated to serving ethnic Koreans living abroad. Now, the exact role of that agency remains unclear, but it is one of the options that were discussed. The proposals were all pledged by Yoon while he was running for president. The PPP said that as soon as the central government and the ruling party reach a complete agreement on the latest revisions on restructuring the central government, the terms will be proposed at the National Assembly. Of course, it does need parliamentary approval if such amendments were to be made. Monday's meeting also focused on ways to address the chronic issue of late-night taxi hailers finding it difficult to grab a ride due to poor working conditions of taxi drivers, something we'll go into a bit more detail in a bit.
So clearly there's a lot on the agenda to be pushed forward at the National Assembly. We'll wait and see what kind of changes are actually implemented to, again, raise efficiency seems to be the goal. Now, if we went to detail with each hot potato issue, that might take a little bit more time. So eventually, as announcements are made, we'll revisit the issue. Let's move on to our second keyword of the day.
Audit.
The National Assembly is due to start an audit of President Yoon's government beginning today. So what can we expect at this point in time?
Right, so just to run through a bit of the details of it, the audit will run for 3 weeks, and a total of just over 780 government agencies and institutions will be grilled. There's also going to be some conglomerate chiefs taking the stand as well. But the first agencies to take the stand are those related to the judiciary and finance, education, defense, and others. Now, the controversy surrounding the Democratic Party chief Lee Jae-myung's possible election law violations could also be targets for the PPP. These kind of events aren't really the headlines are usually the ones that surround the controversies related to both parties, and they rarely delve into kind of, the boring kind of, the details of
the important details.
The important details, exactly. Those aren't really the things that made headlines, and that's because some of it is pretty much mudslinging. It'll also the opposition will also take the opportunity to take aim at the controversies. The ruling party, will take the opportunity to take aim at the controversies surrounding the Moon administration. The DP is also expected to do the same with the scandals and controversies surrounding the ruling party as well. The hot topic will be the request by the state audit to question Moon Jae-in in regard to the killing of a fisheries official by North Korea. They sent a request for written answers. Moon Jae-in rejected that, saying it was rude in his words. And this, of course, led to a lot of political mudslinging between rival parties. But it's not just the controversy surrounding the opposition party and the previous administration. The issue of President Yoon's recent overseas trip is also likely to be a hotly debated subject as well. A lot of horns being locked between the rival parties in regard to that. The PPP deems it a success. The DP calls it a failure. The hot mic issue as well will also be likely brought up. Other issues will likely include the plagiarism allegations against the First Lady Kim Gun-hee as well. So a lot of a lot of popcorn-worthy kind of,
Yeah.
arguments and debates likely to happen. But we'll also have to keep our eyes out to see what kind of policies and directions that these state agencies have. That is the whole point of the state audit. So attention should be paid on that as well.
Thanks for clarifying the objective of the audits, but you're
Yeah,
right. I think to be mindful of those headlines is really important as well. It is politically charged, so be
yeah,
smart about what you observe and what you take in. All
right.
right, let's take a look at the COVID-19 situation. Clearly, rules and restrictions are being lifted one at a time. Let's move on to our third keyword of the day.
Nursing home
So,
visits.
with COVID 19 cases falling, more social distancing measures are likely to be eased. Among them is allowing visitors to return to nursing homes. Those plastic dividers have been lifted. What's the latest?
Yeah, so the health officials were particularly cautious about such facilities because they are full of people who are highly vulnerable to the virus.
Right.
But since cases are, of course, decreasing, that is one of the reasons cited for easing such restrictions to these facilities. And the government will allow face to face meetings in such facilities, such as nursing homes and psychiatric hospitals, as well as facilities for people with disabilities. That's starting today.
Mm.
In-person meetings were actually allowed in these places after late April to mark Family Month in May, but they were stopped again on July 25th due to a resurgence in COVID-19 cases.
Mm.
Due to the ban, families could visit their institutionalized relatives, but only from behind a transparent barrier,
Mm.
including during the Chuseok holiday in early September. Health officials say a steady decrease in the daily infections and more than a 90% rate of vaccination with the second booster of the residents, so 4 shots in total, led the government to decide to loosen restrictions. Under the eased rules, any visitors confirmed to be negative through the use of COVID-19 self-test kits will be allowed to hold hands with and hug their elderly relatives. So
Yeah.
those barriers have been put down now from today. However, facilities are still being advised to follow several quarantine rules. They should receive visitors' reservations in advance. They should check visitors' self test kit results to ensure that they are negative. They are going to be prohibiting indoor eating as well as ventilating rooms before and after visits. And also, face masks are also required as well. Facility residents will also be permitted temporarily to go out if they have received their second booster, so a 4th shot, or have been infected with COVID-19 before and have received 2 doses of the
Mm.
vaccine.
Mm.
And before returning to the facility, they must also take a rapid antigen test and produce a negative result as well. Suspended programs and events are also expected to resume. Outside lecturers will now be allowed to enter nursing homes after receiving a booster shot, or if they have been previously again infected with COVID-19 and have 2 doses. Health authorities warn that stricter rules, though, could be restored in the future, depending on the domestic virus situation. So, of course, as with all the other ease measures, they are subject to change depending on the
Mm.
situation.
All right, but for, I guess, folks who have loved ones at nursing homes and mental institutions and these facilities for the disabled, it's a little bit of alleviation, much belatedly, I suppose.
Right.
But some of these changes, again, like you said, may be subject to change if the virus cases go up again. As Adam alluded to earlier, we've been having difficulty trying to catch a cab in the wee hours of the night, and it seems like there might be some sort of fixture. This is our fourth keyword of the day.
Taxi shortage.
So the government and the ruling People Power Party are to announce a set of measures to resolve the late night taxi shortage sparked amid the pandemic. It's quite simple, supply and demand. I mean, during the pandemic, we weren't going out. We were discouraged, in fact. And so, of course, there are less taxis and we haven't really gone back. And if you've been to these areas with young folks, it's crowded at night.
With young folks.
All right. So what kind of changes can we expect?
Right. Well, this whole issue kind of came to the fore after demand for taxis, of course, took a nosedive when the pandemic hit. Many of the drivers actually left the profession to work as food delivery workers because demand for that actually skyrocketed during the pandemic. So that's where the money was. Over the past few months, though, many people have been complaining of a shortage of nighttime taxis, especially as demand for rides surged after, of course, nearly all the social distancing rules were lifted. Also, late night taxi drivers often turned down many customers and accepted only those traveling long distances who pay more money. That, of course, led to complaints among the public. But that's been an issue that's been a public complaint even before the pandemic. So
Ah,
that's kind of been a years-long issue as well. I mean, if you go to areas like Gangnam, you see a lot of cases where taxi drivers reject a lot of the customers because they're not going too far enough. But one of the measures that was agreed during Monday's meeting, was to hike the fee for clients requesting late night taxis and arrange for the money to go directly to the drivers instead of going through taxi operating companies who often take, a small commission off of that.
mm,
Another measure was to deregulate the country's taxi industry by repealing the enforcement of mandatory days off for
mm,
drivers so they can work as much as they want. The PPP also noted that no change will be made to daytime
mm,
taxi fees. So kind of, to try and get that balance for the customers
mm,
as well. But of
mm,
course, we don't know the details yet. They are to be announced.
mm.
So we'll have to see what comes out.
Largely, it requires flexibility and incentives for, I guess, the taxi drivers to operate at such late hours. It's difficult, right? I mean, we can't disregard that. We need more options. I mean, if you've seen the local surveys on whether people are willing to pay more money to go home in these wee hours of the night, majority answered yes. So it is driven by demand. Yeah, I would want to go home.
I mean, if you had a drink or two or
Yeah,
three
yeah.
or 10, I mean, you can't really walk home. I mean, you want to get home quickly. So it's one of those. It's one of the time frame where you want to kind of get rested and go to bed as quickly as possible. So yeah, even if it was me, I think I'd be willing to pay a little bit more to try and get
Yeah.
home as quickly as possible.
All right. So a lot of these changes are, for the time being, just rough estimations. We'll wait and see what kind of changes are actually implemented. Let's move on to our final keyword of the day.
Gloomy exports.
So Moody's analyst has painted another gloomy picture for Korea's trade outlook. What is the assessment, Adam?
Yeah, unfortunately, another kind of depressing part of our segment is going through these economic data and outlooks, isn't it? But nothing new, I'm afraid. Again, Dave Chaya, who is an associate economist at Moody's Analytics, expected Korea's exports to China, which is Korea's, of course, largest trading partner, to continue to fall until early next year. He added that Korean exports as a whole, therefore, aren't looking very good. Korea's exports grew at the slowest pace, of course, in nearly 2 years. In September, the country has seen export growth decline to the single digits since June, and slowdowns in the US, Europe, and China have put the brakes on demand for Korean goods. Also, China and the US, that is kind of pushing to become more domestically independent. Korea's trade balance has also been in the red for 6 straight months, the first time that has happened since 1997. Exports to China are down 6.5% and has decreased for the 4th straight month as well. China was also bearish on Korea's chip exports as raw material prices soar. The global demand is low for such items. So overall, the trade outlook isn't looking very good going into the end of this year and early next year as well. Many experts and economists do believe that it might get better from either the second quarter or from the second half of next year. But of course, never say never. We don't know, especially with the volatile markets at the moment. Meanwhile, though, the Korea Electric Power Corporation, not fact or an opinion rather, believes that if Korea reduces electricity use by 10% a year, that it could alleviate the country's trade deficit, apparently. That's because KEPCO believes that would reduce the country's reliance on liquefied natural gas imports. So they believe that will kind of help alleviate the trade imbalance that's happening in the country.
It is, again, to note that it is KEPCO's analysis. It would be in their interest to do so. More on the economic outlook in our second hour. Professor Young Jun Seok, thank you so much, Adam, for today's conversation. I'll see you tomorrow.
You're very welcome. See you tomorrow.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.